The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, Part 9. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent Podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. I hope everybody enjoyed that UFO episode last week. I certainly did, diving deeper into Marty's unique way of looking at this phenomena and, mixing it up with spiritual stuff, occult ritual, ancient mythology, and all of that. But for this week, we are going back to the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort.
But the thing I don't think that anybody actually realizes about the UFO situation is that a lot of those people were actually on drugs. Okay?
That's right. They were
Just
on
in
drugs.
case you weren't aware.
And we are, again, joined this week by our good friend, the Watcher, from deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space. Watcher, you there, buddy? Do we have the connection?
Hey, how's it going, fellas?
He surfaces.
He is there.
It's always a pleasure. Glad to hear more of the Book of the Damned. Like, I love the Marty-sodes, but just this endless catalog of unbelievable yet real occurrences that are apparently common.
Yeah.
We just never hear about it.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, this week, if we do what I think, which is I think we might finish the book this week, the final few chapters do have some UFO-y stuff. So
okay.
it should blend nicely with last week's UFO sode. So
Cool.
before that, we have some emails and Space Weather News. From spaceweather.com. Scrambled radio transmissions. Yesterday's strong geomagnetic storm scrambled high-frequency radio transmissions in North America. Jim Falls of Eureka reported, when the geomagnetic storm alert arrived, I went out to my ham shack and listened to Morse code and digital signals in the 80-meter band fighting their way through the storm. They have a particularly warbly sound, which is distinctive of trans-aurora propagation, and some say it sounds like it's bubbling up through water. Very cool. Next time, he says, he'll make a recording for us, so stay tuned for that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And dead sunspot explodes update. The corpse of old sunspot AR-2987 exploded on April 11th, hurling debris directly towards Earth. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded this eruption. The S-shaped magnetic filament at the base of the explosion is a classic sigmoid structure. Solar magnetic fields often assume this shape just before they explode, and one study shows that sigmoid precursors are present in over 50% of coronal mass ejections. Indeed, shortly after the explosion, a full halo CME emerged from the blast site, and this CME is expected to reach Earth on April 14th. A new NOAA model pinpoints its arrival time at 1100 UTC. The impact could spark a G2-class geomagnetic storm. So, current conditions, solar wind speed is 452.8 kilometers per second. The density is a low 4.1 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number is low, 13. And the neutron count is going up a bit, 7.3% above the space age average. The KP index is rated at 2, which is quiet, but the 24-hour max was 4, unsettled. And that is your Space Weather News for the week.
Well, thank you, Russ, for that space weather news.
You are welcome. And let's get a crypto. Looks like the whole market is down right now. Bitcoin, $39,579.74, and Ethereum is $2,972.67. Definitely down from last time I looked at it. All right. So we do have stories piling up, but I think we're just going to tackle emails and then dive right into the book and see if we can finish it off. So let's tackle a couple of emails here. First one is from Ed. Says, hey, when you said you had some gifts for patrons from Egypt, I thought I'd be getting a postcard or some tchotchke. I never expected an Aswan granite pyramidion from Yusuf himself. Outstanding and truly appreciated. Not being clever enough to get one of my emails read on the podcast, I'd like to share my origin tale with you, perhaps a small bit different from others that I've heard. I went from Art Bell to the radio to Sirius to Dark Matter Digital Network. At DMDN, I found Soraya, Adam Sane, Greg Carlwood, and others. I somehow managed to find Ben at Uncharted X on my own. Never knew his last name till he showed up on Grimerica recently. And then Soraya led me to you way back in the early years. And then you led me to Randall at his old website, and Randall led me to Graham. So both you and Ben have led me to many others. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, that's a cool story, buddy.
Keep on keeping on. Best from Ed. Thanks, Ed. And hey,
You went backwards.
you did get your email read on the show. What do you think about that? And yeah, he did. He took a circuitous route.
Yes. A serpentine route.
All right, this is an interesting one. This is called Nice to Meet You, Russ. This is from Margaret. It says, Russ, it was a pleasure meeting you and the others at Fall Creek Falls on St. Patty's Day this year. I was the redheaded fan who crashed the last morning of your tour. Yeah, so when we were on the Cumberland tour, we're down at one of the falls, and there was this woman there, and she's like, she knows Randall. You know,
Okay.
she's like heard the podcast or whatever. She knows of Cosmographia.
She
and
sees him.
Yeah. So we took some photos with her and everything, group photos, and we were like, why weren't you on the trip? But she was there with her family. Anyway, it was cool. So yeah, Margaret, it was good to meet you. She says, she said, in the midst of my exuberance over meeting Randall, I didn't have a chance to thank you for all the good work you do with him and also on your own podcast with Kyle. I appreciate most of the topics you ponder and always feel a little more expansive after listening to one of your episodes. I just recently checked out your show with Clint Beckham from 2018 on arrowheads and hunting, and it really renewed a passion for arrowhead hunting that my father passed down to me.
Heck yes.
I am planning a trip to, what's that? Is that, you know what that one is?
Chillicothe?
Chillicothe.
I don't know.
To visit long-forgotten family and to see mounds and to hear weird stories about mounds and relics found.
Awesome.
There is some weird shit up there. I'm also a big wine gulper and hope to sample some of yours one day. Thank you for your ongoing contributions to the world. Sincerely, from Margaret from Nashville. Thank you, Margaret.
That's cool. Thank you.
And yes, it was great to meet you. Okay. This is from Jeff, a different Jeff. He says, Jeff, a.k.a. Hatchet Jack's Ghost. Interesting alias there. Hey, Snake Bros. Absolutely love the podcast. Found you through a long but highly educational scenic route, starting with Graham Hancock's books to Graham Hancock presentations on YouTube to Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan to Graham and Randall on Joe Rogan to Randall Carlson's old videos on YouTube to Randall on Cosmographia and finally to you. I've been a fan since the first episode I listened to. I particularly enjoy the long-form book reports, Michael Cremo and Charles Fort, etc. I recently purchased a used copy of The Cosmic Serpent by Klube and Napier.
Ooh.
They are very hard to find and very expensive, at least by my standards. Mine cost me just over $150. I've read it once, but like any other book like that, I'll have to read it through three or four more times to really absorb it. First time through it is just to get the gist of the content. I can definitely see why Randall was so inspired by it. It is absolutely fascinating. So I have an offer for you guys. If you all are interested in doing a book series report on it, I'd be happy to loan it and ship it to you for that purpose. I'd want it back when you're done, of course, but I would absolutely love to hear the Snake Bros take on it. It covers a really broad range of subjects from cosmic origins of comets to sources of ancient gods, Egyptian calendar errors, and dead spaces in that calendar. It blew my mind. Keep in mind that this book was published 10 years before the impact of Shoemaker-Levy 9 on Jupiter and a year before Alvarez's report of their finding of the Chicxulub crater, and way before the Chelyabinsk event of just a few years ago. Personally, I believe these guys hit the nail directly on the head. If you are at all interested in my offer, give me an address where I can send the book to. Look forward to hearing from you. Best regards from Jeff, a.k.a. Hatchet Jack's Ghost. P.S. Snakes! Yes, I am
awesome.
interested in doing... Yeah, so I have that one. That's not what he's talking about.
Okay, who's it
It's
by?
Klube and Napier.
Victor Klube. Here we go.
Yes.
hardcover. Ooh,
Yeah.
Let's see how much this bad boy is.
Yeah, they're not
Ooh.
cheap. Yeah.
We could do this.
What is
It's
it?
$250.
Oh, yeah, we could get it. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, I want to sign Russ up to do that job for you, buddy. But
I would need to get it and read through it and see if it's show materially. But yeah.
I would be worried
interested.
to like take somebody's like special copy and then like, the cat gets a hold of it one day.
Right. Yeah.
Or it gets all smoky in the cube, and then we send it back to you and you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Then you know what the cube smells like after a long night of podcasting.
That's true. Yeah, we could get it ourselves.
It's a smoky
But it is a great
room.
It is a great suggestion, Jeff. The Cosmic Serpent would be a good one to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I've heard, this has been an inspiration to a lot of these
Yes, to Graham and Randall and
Right.
many other people.
guys. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Another email
thanks,
here.
buddy.
Yeah. One more email. This is from Pam. No subject. Says, Dear Russ and Kyle, hi, Snake Bros and Snake Family. I am contacting you from the ancient bed of Glacial Lake Agassiz, approximately 1,500 miles north of you. I would like to start by thanking you for what you do. You have helped me survive the last couple of years with your humor, music, and subject matter. I seem to have followed the now well-worn path from Graham to Joe to Randall to you. And through you, I have become a fan of Ben at Uncharted X and Johanna James and learned of many more. I have watched every one of your podcasts on YouTube and have watched several more than once. I have watched Cosmographia right from when it started and eagerly await both podcasts each week. I hope that this won't sound too strange, but the first time I tuned into Cosmographia, I had an instant feeling of family and recognition. But I promise that I won't invite myself for Thanksgiving or ask to borrow money. I have been interested in all the things you talk about starting as a young child. I found my first fossils in a meteorite when I was 7, and I have been searching the ground and the sky my whole life and have often often felt isolated due to my beliefs. It makes me so happy to know that I am not alone in my thoughts. I have never believed that the pyramids were tombs. By the time I was 10, I was certain that there must have been a previous civilization that was global. I have had many paranormal experiences and have long believed that the universe is way more fascinating and mysterious than the modern paradigm teaches. I have a Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Microbiology and work as a high-risk labor and delivery nurse. I read runes and tarot cards and have long been a student of symbology. I think that many coincidences should not be ignored. Thank you so much for introducing me to people and topics and that I have not heard of or come across that explore these things in rational and logical ways. I am hoping to join you guys on one of the outings in the near future and look forward to meeting you in person. Snacks! Sincerely, from Pam.
That's cool.
Thank you.
The Watcher's giving you a big old hell yeah. Fellow medical field person. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. That's the
Well,
emails.
thank you all so much for
Yes.
the kind words.
So many emails we've received. Thank you all for the emails. I do read them all. Just can't read them all on the show.
We don't read the ones where they're mad about.
Oh,
us
yeah. If I can
being-
tell you're mad, I just stop reading it. I have a mad folder. Just this one's mad. That one's also mad.
And Watcher says the pronunciation of that place is Chillicothe.
Chillicothe? Okay.
Chillicothe.
Yeah.
Let's see if he corrects
It's
that.
not,
Okay, yes, you got it
Chillicothe.
right.
In Ohio. That's right. She's going up there for the Serpent Mounds and all the mounds in Ohio.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, on to the Book of the Damned. So on part 8, we ended at the very end of a chapter where we were talking about the falls of leaves, some of which were from the year before. Remember that? So we have one more, or just a bit more in this chapter. A couple more instances here. Notes and Queries, Volume 8. In Italy, in the summer of 1897, an immense number of small, blood-colored clouds covered the sky. About an hour later, a storm broke, and seeds fell to the ground. And it is said that they were identified as products of a tree found only in Central Africa. If, in terms of conventional reasoning, these seeds had been high in the air, they had been in a cold region, but it is our acceptance that these seeds had, for a considerable time, been in a warm region, and for a longer time than it is attributable to suspension by wind power, because it is said that a great number of these seeds were in the first stage of germination. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. On to chapter 20 here. The new dominant, inclusionism. In it, we have a pseudo-standard. We have a datum, and we give it an interpretation in accordance with our pseudo-standard. At present, we have not the delusions of absolutism that may have translated some of the positivists of the 19th century to heaven. Remember he's talking about that? They would become so positive that they would be teleported directly to heaven, luminously. Oh, you don't remember that? We are intermediatists, but feel a lurking suspicion that we may someday solidify and dogmatize and illiberalize into higher positivists. At present, we do not ask whether something be reasonable or preposterous, because we recognize that by reasonableness and preposterousness are meant agreement and disagreement with a standard, which must be a delusion, though not absolutely, of course, and must someday be displaced by a more advanced quasi-delusion. Scientists in the past have taken the positivist attitude, is this or that reasonable or unreasonable, analyze them, and we find that they meant relative to a standard, such as Newtonism or Daltonism or Darwinism or Lyellism. But they have written and spoken and thought as if they could mean real reasonableness and real unreasonableness. So,
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I really like that part. Yeah,
you know, we kind of use the same analysis with the phrase. How does it go? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, because it's like, well, you're deciding that something's extraordinary based on your assumptions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so he calls it their
reasonableness.
Yes, their
because you're basing it on a standard that's quasi
relative to a standard.
Relative
exactly.
to a standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
a quasi delusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, right.
That's a really
You've
good.
decided that the world fits into this kind of framework, and then you judge everything on that framework, not necessarily reasonableness or logicalness or unreasonableness, but whether or not it applies to that framework.
Right.
And if you feel like it stands outside of that framework, then it's unreasonable, even if it isn't. So, yeah.
It's simple too. Like if you were playing a game, like Portal,
Okay.
you can make logical decisions in Portal that are completely illogical
Oh, yeah.
in the real world.
Right.
Right? Because
But given the framework of the game,
exactly.
yes, exactly, yeah. I have a gun that makes portals, so I can make decisions that completely don't make sense in a world without guns that make portals.
So that's an example of the.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's fantastic. Yeah. My own acceptance, Fort says, is that either a world or a vast superconstruction or a world, if red substances and fishes fell from it, hovered over India in the summer of 1860. And something then fell from somewhere, July 17th, 1860, at Dhurmsala. Whatever it was, it is so persistently alluded to as a meteorite that I look back and see that I adopted this convention myself. But in the London Times, December 26, 1860, a professor of Hindustani University College in London writes that he had sent to a friend in Dhurmsala for an account of the stones that had fallen at that place. And the answer? Diverse forms and sizes, many of which bore great resemblance to ordinary cannonballs just discharged from engines of war. It is an addition to our data of spherical objects that have arrived upon this earth. Note that they are spherical stone objects. So it's like, is he talking about, we're going back and thinking about this exploding bolides. Do we get spherical ejecta? These tektites.
Right.
So they look like little cannonballs,
Yeah.
maybe a little cannon shot,
Yeah, they do.
small ones.
And they're
Yeah.
heavy,
They're heavy.
the ones that I always find. I mean, like this one's pretty. That's pretty cannonball-y.
Yes, exactly. They look like shot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, not in the least, except to good positivists or the homogenous-minded, does this speculation interfere with the concept of some other world that is in successful communication with certain esoteric ones upon this earth by a code of symbols that print in rock, like symbols of telephotographers in selenium. I think that sometimes, in favorable circumstances, emissaries have come to this earth, secret meetings. Of course, this sounds... But... secret meetings, emissaries, esoteric ones in Europe before the war broke out. However, as to most of our data, I think of super things that have passed close to this Earth with no more interest in this Earth than have passengers upon a steamship in the bottom of the sea. Or passengers may have a keen interest, but circumstances of schedules and commercial requirements forbid investigation of the bottom of the sea. So I'll back up there a bit. That part where he says, I think that sometimes in favorable circumstances, emissaries have come to this earth. There's secret meetings. And then, of course, it sounds like maybe I shouldn't have marked that. But he just keeps ending the sentences with dashes. You know, of course, this sounds. But secret meetings. Yeah. Anyway, I like this part of, something huge passes the earth and it has no more interest in the earth than do passengers on a ship in the bottom of the sea. Or some of those passengers might be really interested, but, they got schedules to keep. You can't do any investigating at the bottom of the sea.
I see, yeah.
Then, on the other hand, we may have data of super scientific attempts to investigate phenomena of this Earth from above, perhaps by beings from so far away that they had never even heard that something, somewhere, asserts a legal right to this Earth. Again, going Bramley there, so he's making the implication that maybe sometimes we get studied for a little bit by something that doesn't know we're supposed to be off limits because of custodians or something. Still another source of the merging away of our data, that upon general principles of continuity, if super vessels or super vehicles have traversed this Earth's atmosphere, there must be mergers between them and terrestrial phenomena. Observations upon them must merge away into observations upon clouds and balloons and meteors. We shall begin with data that we cannot distinguish ourselves and work our way out of mergers into extremes. In the observatory, Volume 35, it is said that according to a newspaper, March 6, 1912, residents of Warmley in England were greatly excited by something that was supposed to be a splendidly illuminated aeroplane passing over the village. The machine was apparently traveling at a tremendous rate and came from the direction of Bath and went towards, Gloucester? I can never remember how to say this one. Gloucester. That's it. The editor says that it was a large triple-headed fireball. Tremendous indeed, he says, but we are prepared for anything nowadays. That is satisfactory. We'd not like to creep up stealthily and then jump out of a corner with our data, but this editor, at least, is prepared to read in Nature.
That's exactly what he does in the beginning of the book, though.
Jumps out of a corner at you with the...
What was it? I shouldn't have brought that up.
I should have mentioned that. Yeah, that piece of ice that's the size of an elephant. Yeah. Whoops. Shouldn't have said that yet. A correspondent writes that in the County Wicklow in Ireland, at about 6 o'clock in the evening, he had seen in the sky an object that looked like the moon in its three-quarter aspect. We note the shape, which approximates to triangularity, and we note that in color it is said to have been golden yellow. It moved slowly, and in about 5 minutes it disappeared behind a mountain. The editor gives his opinion that the object may have been an escaped balloon. In Nature, August 11th, in 1898, there is a story taken from the July member of the Canadian Weather Review by the meteorologist F.F. Payne that he had seen in the Canadian sky a large pear-shaped object sailing rapidly. At first, he supposed that the object was a balloon. Its outline was sharply defined. But as no cage was seen, it was concluded that it must be a massive cloud. In about 6 minutes, this object became less definite. Whether because of increasing distance or not, the mass became less dense and finally it disappeared. As to cyclonic formation, no whirling motion could be seen. So those are two interesting ones. The first one, the moon in its three-quarter aspect, you can imagine how that can be sort of a triangle shape. Mm-hmm. So they see a bright yellow triangle, luminous, self-luminous triangle in the night sky moving slowly over the area. And then there's a meteorologist sees something that he first thinks is a balloon. It's pear-shaped. But then it gets fuzzy and then vanishes. So it starts out being, what he says, it has sharp,
clearly defined.
Yeah, it's clearly defined in sharp lines, and then it fuzzes out and disappears. So
I was thinking that if it was traveling away and there was like a haze,
yes,
it could just
and Fort says that too.
fuzzy.
He's like, it's unclear whether it became unclear because of the air.
yeah.
Upon August 27th, 1885, at about 8:30 a.m., there was observed by Mrs. Adelina D. Bassett a strange object in the clouds coming from the north. She called the attention of Mrs. L. Lowell to it, and they were both somewhat alarmed. However, they continued to watch the object steadily for some time. It drew nearer. It was of a triangular shape and seemed to be about the size of a pilot boat mainsail, with chains attached to the bottom of it. While crossing the land, it appeared to descend, but as it went out to sea, it ascended and continued to ascend until it was lost to sight high in the clouds. With such power to ascend, I don't think much myself of the notion that it was an escaped balloon partially deflated. Nevertheless, General Lefroy, correlating with exclusionism, attempts to give a terrestrial interpretation to this occurrence, and he argues that the thing may have been a balloon that escaped from France or England, or the only aerial thing of terrestrial origin that, even to this date of about 35 years later, has been thought to have crossed the Atlantic Ocean. He accounts for the triangular form by deflation, a shapeless bag, barely able to float. But my own acceptance is that great deflation does not accord with observations upon its power to ascend.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. This gives you another idea of the time we're talking about here. Balloons are the only thing that have crossed the Atlantic Ocean at this point. In the Times, October 1st, 1885, Charles Harding of the RMS, or Royal Meteorological Society, argues that if it had been a balloon from Europe, surely it would have been seen and reported by many vessels. Whether he was as good a Briton as the general or not, he shows awareness of the United States, or that thing may have been a partly collapsed balloon that had escaped from the U.S. General Lefroy wrote to Nature about it, saying, whatever his sensitiveness may have been, that the columns of the Times were hardly suitable for such a discussion. If in the past there had been more persons like General Lefroy, we'd have better than the mere fragments of data that in most cases are too broken up very well to piece together. He took the trouble to write a friend, W.H. Gosling of Bermuda, who also was an extraordinary person, and he went to the trouble of interviewing Miss Bassett and Mrs. Lowell, and their description to him was somewhat different. An object from which nets were suspended, a deflated balloon with its network hanging from it, a super dragnet, and that something was trawling overhead.
Trawling? Or trolling?
Trolling, T-R-A-W.
Oh, trawling.
Yeah, like a trawler. I don't know. It's like a fishing term, isn't it?
I don't know.
Or should I look it up? Let's see what it says. Trawl, troll. To fish with a trawl net.
Huh.
Troll net. I don't know. Maybe it is pronounced troll. Anyway, it's a fishing term. You're using a net.
That's what I thought.
And you're
Trolling. That's a fishing term.
Okay.
I never knew that it was spelled trawl.
Mm. Yeah. So Fort says, I think we're fished for. It may be that we're highly esteemed by super, what is that word? Epicures.
Sargasso seaman?
Yeah. Super epicures somewhere.
Huh.
An epicure being a person who takes particular pleasure in fine food and drink. It makes me more cheerful when I think that we may be of some use after all. I think that dragnets have often come down and have been mistaken for whirlwinds and waterspouts, or some account of seeming structures in whirlwinds and waterspouts are astonishing. And I have data that, in this book, I can't take up at all. Mysterious disappearances. I lost my place. Okay, there we are. I think we're fished for, but this is a little expression on the side, relates to trespassers, and has nothing to do with the subject that I shall take up on some other time, or our use to some other mode of seeming that has a legal right to us. Our Paris correspondent from Nature writes that in relation to this balloon, which is said to have been seen over Bermuda in September, no ascent took place in France, which can account for it. So again, this is classic Fort. He spreads the accounts and the descriptions of the thing that he's talking about out in between big paragraphs of him talking about us being fish.
Yeah.
So yeah, the final thing we've got here is from Nature, that Nature's Paris correspondent writes and says that there are no balloons in France that could account for this sighting. So I'm not sure what point he's trying to make here.
Maybe it's the breakaway civilization balloons.
Yeah.
They're airships.
Yeah.
Maybe they're bringing frozen fish from Antarctica and dropping them everywhere by accident.
Could be. Why would they think? I just don't understand. The sighting was in Bermuda, so I don't understand why people are trying to say it was a balloon from France. I don't get it. I mean,
Don't know.
Okay.
Maybe at the time France was like there was a bunch of balloons going out because they were having some big.
Yeah, and then they get the Paris correspondent that says no balloons, no ascents of any balloons in France could account for this. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the point is there. It does. The account sounded to me like a balloon that had lost its basket. So, Fort says the old dominant in its jealousy and its suppression of all things and thoughts that endangered its supremacy. In reading discussions of papers by scientific societies, I have often noted how, when they approached forbidden or irreconcilable subjects, the discussions are thrown into confusion and ramification. It's as if scientific discussions have often been led astray, as if purposefully, as if something directive hovering over them. Of course, I mean only the spirit of all development. Just so in any embryo, cells that would tend to vary from the appearances of their era are compelled to correlate. So I just wanted to include that part, that he's just saying there that when he's reading in scientific journals, and he's read thousands of them, that he notices that in the journals, when they begin to approach a subject that seems far outside of their paradigms, the discussion almost immediately goes awry, goes astray, gets led away from this, and then they start bickering and arguing with each other about meaningless things that have nothing to do with the original claim that they all were originally talking about. And he's like, is this purposeful? It's like it seems like they can't even discuss this thing because like something else is injecting into the conversation stuff that just leads them away from the topic.
Yeah, I would have assumed, I mean, nowadays they won't discuss it because they already make the assumption that other people will think they're ridiculous for even considering it worth discussion, right?
Yeah, that's right. He has an example of what he's talking about.
But it may not have been the case back then. It could have been different.
Well, and it's also like these guys are writing letters to a journal that then gets published monthly or something, and then they have to wait. And then so then the people they're talking to wait to read the journal to see the letter that's responding to them, and then they write in. So it's a very slow process.
Right.
And of course, when you're having a discussion like that, you can take time to consider.
Right.
And, but yes, you end up, I don't know. I've seen this too, like even in just
forums. And
in forums, somebody will say some stuff and there's some really incredible stuff in there. And at first the discussion is kind of on that incredible stuff, but then some, skirp comes in there and just completely, totally leads the whole discussion astray. Trawls them.
All right. Well, let's take a break.
Yeah.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. The Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies. Ancient shit! That is what we like to look into, as well as Fortean phenomena. in this final, final installment of the Book of the Damned. So, let's get back to it.
Trawling.
Yes, that's right.
It is a thing.
He read it right. I homo incorrected us.
And I meant to read this before I started, so let me do this now. This is another account of strange things falling from the sky from somebody. So this says, I live not too far from where the recent Cumberland trip was, and at the time of this incident, I lived just a couple miles from the park entrance to the lodge there at Fall Creek Falls. This was about a year ago, probably in the spring. While driving back to the house at night, there was a quick succession of splat, splat, splat on the windshield. So he says he's got a mid-90s F-250 with small lift and big tires, so the impacts were about 6 to 7 feet off the ground.
Sound like you live in the hills, though, bud.
Which made me think those were some huge bugs. Gross. And no other thoughts about the matter until the next day when I walked out to the truck and I could see the dried remains of those exploded bugs on the windshield. They were quite obviously not bugs, but great big plump earthworms.
What?
No idea what they were doing at that height. Maybe they were levitating and got caught in the headlights. That's my strange stuff falling from the sky contribution from None of Your Business in the Discord.
None of your business.
So that's a good one. Earthworms splatting on the windshield.
That is fully and easily explainable. It was it started raining. The worms came out. Bunch of birds were flying by, and they were like, hey, let's grab as many worms as we can. And they grabbed too many, and some of them were dropping. Or maybe the birds got attacked by another flock of birds who were like, hey, look, there's a bunch of birds.
Fighting over the worms.
Eat those birds who are carrying those worms.
Yeah, the birds got caught in a whirlwind while carrying the worms.
Yes.
Okay, so back to the book here. And Fort discussing the possibility that scientific societies get distracted in their discussions on forbidden or irreconcilable subjects. So he says, in Nature, volume 90, Charles Tilden Smith writes that at Wiltshire in England, April 8th, 1912, he saw something in the sky, quote, unlike anything that I had ever seen before. Although I have studied the skies for many years, I have never seen anything like it. He saw two stationary dark patches upon clouds. The extraordinary part, they were stationary upon clouds that were rapidly moving. They were fan-shaped or triangular and varied in size, but kept the same position upon different clouds as cloud after cloud came along. For more than half an hour, Mr. Smith watched these dark patches, and his impression as to the one that appeared first, that it was really a heavy shadow cast upon a thin veil of clouds by some unseen object away in the west, which was intercepting the sun's rays. Upon page 24 of this volume of Nature is a letter from another correspondent to the effect that similar shadows are cast by mountains upon clouds, and that no doubt Mr. Smith was right in attributing the appearance to some unseen object which was intercepting the sun's rays. But the old dominant that was a jealous dominant, and the wrath of the old dominant against such an irreconcilability as large, opaque objects in the sky casting down shadows upon clouds. Still, the dominants are suave very often, or are not absolute gods, and the way attention was led away from this subject is an interesting study in quasi-divine bamboozlement. Upon page 268, Charles J.P. Cave, a meteorologist, writes that upon April 5th and 8th, at Ditcham Park in Petersfield, he had observed a similar appearance while watching some pilot balloons, but he describes something not in the least like a shadow on clouds, but a stationary cloud. The inference seems to be that the shadows at Chisbury may have been shadows of pilot balloons. And then on page 322, another correspondent writes upon shadows cast by mountains. Upon page 348, someone else carries on the divergence by discussing this third letter. Then someone else takes up the third letter mathematically, and then there is a correction of error in this mathematic demonstration, and I think it looks very much what I think it looks like. But the mystery here, that the dark patches at Chisbury could not have been cast by stationary pilot balloons that were to the west, or that were between clouds and the setting sun. If to the west of Chisbury, a stationary object were high in the air, intercepting the sun's rays, the shadow of the stationary object would not have been stationary, but would have moved higher and higher with the setting of the sun. So yeah, he's just talking about how you can watch a discussion where somebody says, here's what I saw and it was really weird. And then it just kind of fractures away into nonsense. You know, somebody's like, well, there's mountains. And then somebody's like, yeah, you know, I saw a mountain cast a shadow on a cloud like that. And another guy's, well, I saw a balloon do it, something like that. And then they start doing math and then the math is wrong and somebody corrects the math. And after a while, there's, you know, they've forgotten the details of the original sighting. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yep.
Scientific.
I was trying to figure out if, like, how some kind of standing wave of energy could have caused, like, the density of the cloud in this one spot, which made it look darker.
Mm-hmm. It also seems weird that they're like, just not to get away from your idea there, but you know,
But I couldn't figure it out.
Oh, okay.
I was like working on it while you were reading through that thing. I was just like, I can't figure this out.
Like there's some kind of density there that as the clouds are moving across, there's always a dense
There's always
spot.
a dark spot right there
Yeah.
because for whatever reason, there's like suddenly like more moisture.
Yeah.
You know, what would it be? Nucleating into little crystals.
Yeah. Yes.
And then when they get out of that dense, like maybe it was
it's actually rarefied. So when the clouds move in there, it starts to freeze them and makes ice, and you know, and that makes it darker. I don't know.
Yep, that's kind of what I was working on. But I was trying to think of, you know, maybe it's gravitational waves and it was like compressed space time.
Space time.
And I don't know what compressed space time would do to a cloud.
Yeah. And the idea that it was balloon shadows, but the clouds are moving very swiftly because of wind. So it's like the balloons
Why would
would
the balloon be
stationary.
It would have
yeah.
to be tethered, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's right about the shadow of the mountain would be moving.
Yeah.
But, you know,
It would
again,
be going upwards as
Yeah.
the sun went down.
right.
Yeah.
Or the other way around if the sun was rising. Just
Yeah.
depends on what time
That's
of day
right.
it was.
Yeah.
But, you know, that
Yeah. It was to the
Wouldn't
west, so it would be
nec-
the setting sun. Right.
that wouldn't necessarily happen. Sometimes the sun sets in the east.
This has been written of in myth and legend.
Forgot what I was going to say. It might not be noticeable in the amount of time that he watched it, unless it was, you know, depends on where they're nearby things sort of reaching into the sky like tall trees that he could have marked the height, the angle of difference between the top of that tree and the shadowy spot.
Yeah.
Or was it like way up? You know, if it was down closer to the horizon, that would be, yeah, you might notice it rising as the sun was setting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't either.
It's possible to not notice that because it does take some time.
I'm
But anyway.
scanning back through this to see if there's other details. Let's see.
That is strange.
Yeah.
I've often thought, just in noticing some of the clouds in our Texas skies, like I've seen this certain formation multiple times where there are these gigantic arms, there, or just like think of like rows like of crops or
Yeah.
something. Like there's this furrow.
Yep.
And then there's a gap, and then there's another one, and then another cloud, long,
Yeah, giant
row of
waves in the
cloud,
sky.
and then there's
Yeah.
a gap, and I always like when I see that formation, I'm just like, yeah, this is like huge, standing waves of pressure and rarefication in the sky.
Yeah. It's
You
probably
know.
making noise. We just can't hear it. It's too low. You know, it's like you can imagine it's like a sound.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've also seen here, and this is rare.
So that would be a good example. In other words, like, well, I looked into the sky, and there was a part of the sky that I couldn't see through, and as the clouds moved, it's like there were always these rows of the sky that I couldn't see clearly through. But that's because of pressure.
Yep.
And rarefication. Mm-hmm. So that was really where I was going with like, but this is a spot within cloud.
Yeah, two of them, and the clouds are moving across, and the spots stay in the same place.
Because it's actually there's something going on there with atmospheric pressure and a giant standing wave that's like.
Yeah. Well, what I thought of, because I've seen this,
And that could
is
be seismic.
we have a low bank of clouds.
It could have been related to like seismic vibrations or something.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't know.
Yeah. I've seen this a couple times here.
I'm not a meteor geologist.
There'll be a low bank of clouds, and the clouds are light. You know, during the day they're like a bright gray color, but you'll see dark patches on them, and sometimes the clouds that you're watching are moving, but the dark patches don't. but then there will be a break in the low clouds, and you see that dark patch is being cast by a cloud that's way up there.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. So it could have been some clouds further in the distance, especially if he was looking towards the horizon.
Yeah.
Further in the distance that he couldn't see, that were not in a like quickly moving jet stream or something.
And since they're really far away, they could be moving fast, but their movement is almost imperceptible because they're so far, right?
That seems like most likely explanation. And we'll just end it there. Mystery solved. Next mystery.
But these guys start talking about mountains and balloons, and I'm just like, well, what, I don't know. Okay, Scientific American, volume 46, 2 triangular luminous appearances reported by several observers in Lebanon, Connecticut, evening of July 3rd, 1882, on the moon's upper limb, which we learned a couple of episodes ago.
I would say, sorry, I've got to go back to the cloud thing. If they were closer to the sun, further away from his perspective, and they were moving, then their shadows closer to him would appear to be moving quickly.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
So, anyway.
So these 2 triangular luminous appearances on the moon's upper limb disappeared, and then 2 dark triangular appearances that looked like notches were seen 3 minutes later on the lower limb of the moon. They approached each other, met, and instantly disappeared. The merger here is notches that have at times been seen on the moon's limb, thought to be cross-sections of craters. This is listed in monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, volume 37.
I mean, the moon's limb.
Yeah, so we talked about this with GMA. They were talking about limbs and fingers.
What?
The limb is like just the extremity of the object. That's, it's like not in the middle of it, but on the edge.
Okay.
So that's what they're saying here. It says luminous appearances, triangular luminous appearances on the moon's upper limb. So on the top of the moon, they see 2 triangles, bright.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Then they disappear, and then 2 dark triangular appearances that look like notches were seen 3 minutes later on the lower limb at the bottom of it.
They look like notches into the moon?
Into the disc, yeah.
Okay.
Then these 2 notches approach each other, met, and then they disappear. Okay.
Mysterious triangles in the sky, mysterious triangles on the earth. No connection whatsoever.
Okay, so these appearances of July 3rd, 1882 were vast upon the moon, and they seemed to be cutting off or obliterating nearly a quarter of its surface. Wow. Something else that may have looked like a vast black crow poised over this Earth from the moon. In Monthly Weather Review, volume 41, description of a shadow in the sky of some unseen body, April 8th, 1913, Fort Worth in Texas. Supposed to have been cast by an unseen cloud. This patch of shade moved with the declining sun. So there we go. That's an unseen cloud one there. Okay, Report of British Association, 1854. Account by 2 observers of a faint but distinctly triangular object visible for 6 nights in the sky. It was observed from 2 stations that were not far apart, but the parallax was considerable. Whatever it was acceptably relatively close to this Earth. I now have some notes upon an occurrence that suggests a force not interpreted by air as light, but interpreted or reflected by the ground as light. I think of something that for a week was suspended over London, of an emanation that was not interpreted as light until it reached the ground. So what he means there is, I think what he's saying is that a light that could move through the atmosphere unseen until it hits the ground, and then you see a circle of light on the ground. Whereas normally you turn a flashlight on and you can see a cone of light in the air just from dust and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So he's calling that interpreted. This was a force not interpreted by the air as light, but interpreted or reflected by the ground as light. In Lancet, June 1st, 1867, every night for a week, a light had appeared in Woburn Square in London, upon the grass of a small park enclosed by railings. Crowds gathered. Police were called out for the special service of maintaining order and making the populace move on. The editor of the Lancet went to the square, and he says that he saw nothing but a patch of light falling upon an arbor at the northeast corner of the enclosure. Seems to me that this is interesting enough. But in this editor, we have a companion for Mr. Simmons and Dr. Gray. He suggests that the light came from a street lamp and does not say that he could trace it to any such origin himself, but recommends that the police should investigate neighboring street lamps. I'd not say that such a commonplace as light from a street lamp would not attract and excite and deceive great crowds for a week, but I do accept that any cop who was called upon for extra work would have needed nobody's suggestion to settle that point the very first thing. Something hung over the sky, suspended over London Square for a week. So in other words, it was attracting crowds. There's this big circle of light at night in the square.
Is there a corresponding like dot in the sky? Like point of light in the sky?
It doesn't say.
Yeah, that's really weird.
And he's just saying, like, if it was a street lamp, like, no one's going to be excited by this, right? People know what street lamp, and they cast a circle, and like you're like, wow, there's a lamp right there, no big deal. But there's a giant circle of light in a place where there isn't a street lamp, and so people are gathering around wondering what it is. And he's saying that it isn't. There's no visible beam in the air like you would have with a powerful spotlight shining down from something. So yeah, I love that, this guy's like, well, there's probably a street lamp. He went there and says it's a street lamp, but doesn't try to identify which street lamp, but suggests that the police investigate which street lamp is causing this problem.
Very good scientists.
It's the editor for that journal. So, like Mr. Simmons. All right, chapter 21. Knowledge, December 28th, 1883. Seeing so many meteorological phenomena in your excellent paper, Knowledge, I am tempted to ask for an explanation of the following, which I saw when on board the British India Company's steamer Patna, while on a voyage up from the Persian Gulf. In May 1880, on a dark night at about 11:30 p.m., there suddenly appeared on each side of the ship an enormous, luminous wheel, whirling around, the spokes of which seemed to brush the ship along. The spokes would be 200 or 300 yards long and resembled the birch rods of the dames' schools. Each wheel contained about 60... I guess this guy went to a Catholic school, huh?
We've heard this.
Yes, we've read about these in Ivan T. Sanderson's book.
Yes.
Each wheel contained about 16 spokes, and although the wheels must have been some 500 or 600 yards in diameter, the spokes could be distinctly seen all the way around. The phosphorescent gleam seemed to glide along flat upon the surface of the sea, no light being visible in the air above the water. The appearance of the spokes could be almost exactly represented by standing in a boat and flashing a bull's eye lantern horizontally across the surface of the water, round and round. I may mention that the phenomenon was also seen by Captain Avern of the Patna and Mr. Manning, third officer. This is from Lee 4 Brace.
So, weren't people speculating that it was actually parallel lines, but because they were so distant, that looked like spokes?
Yeah.
Turning, but it was like parallel lines possibly moving past the ship.
Yes, that if they're long enough that they'll have
the focal point.
They'll seem to merge into the distance, but they actually, yeah. So the part that's moving past you looks like it's moving
in front of you. Is moving way faster than the part in the distance.
Right. So it looks like a big rotating wheel. Yeah. So that was from alias Lee 4 Brace, and he says, P.S. The wheels advanced along with the ship for about 20 minutes.
And if the Earth is banana-shaped, then it could have just been rings going down the banana.
Yes. Okay, so that's a letter to the meteorological journal Knowledge. So then there's a response. Knowledge, January 11th, 1884. A letter from A. McD. That Lee 4 Brace, who sees so many meteorological phenomena in your excellent paper, should have signed himself the modern Ezekiel, for his vision of wheels is quite as wonderful as the prophets. The writer then takes up the measurements that were given and calculates a velocity at the circumference of a wheel of about 166 yards per second, apparently considering that especially incredible. He then says, from the nom de plume he assumes, it might be inferred that your correspondent is in the habit of sailing close to the wind. In other words, he's drunk. So he asked permission to suggest an explanation of his own. It is that before 11:30 p.m. there had been numerous accidents to the main brace, and that it had required splicing so often that almost any ray of light would have taken on a rotary motion. So in other words, this guy just gets trolled by somebody. The response, like Reddit has invented nothing, right? This dude writes in, he's like, here's this weird stuff I saw. And then the first response he gets is like, okay, like, what are you, Ezekiel? You're seeing giant wheels in the water. You're probably hammered. It was just your sail with holes in it. Like, that's the response he gets.
Wow.
Just sounds like Reddit to me. Anyway, knowledge. Again, January 25th, 1884, Mr. Brace answers and signs himself as J.W. Robertson. And he says, I don't suppose Mr. A. McD means any harm, but I do think it's rather unjust to say a man is drunk because he sees something out of the common. If there's one thing I pride myself upon, it's being able to say that never in my life have I indulged in anything stronger than water. From this curiosity of pride, he goes on to say that he had not intended to be exact, but to give his impressions of dimensions and velocity. And he ends amiably, however, no offense taken, where I suppose none is meant.
And you, my good sir, are a scriptor.
That's right. The obvious explanation of this phenomenon is that under the surface of the sea, in the Persian Gulf, was a vast luminous wheel, and that it was the light from its submerged spokes that Mr. Robertson saw shining upwards. It seems clear that this light did shine upward from the origin below the surface, but at first it is not so clear how vast luminous wheels, each the size of a village, ever got under the surface of the Persian Gulf. Also, there may be some misunderstanding as to what they were doing there. Our attitude...
I think this was the question. Was one of the wheels on one side of the ship and the other wheel was on the other side of the ship? I think we had talked about this because that's what they thought there were two wheels. When you look off one side, because they're
Well, this guy just says there appeared on each side of the ship an enormous luminous wheel. In
That's
other
what I
words,
mean.
The ship is on top of it, but it's one giant wheel rolling through the water.
Oh, okay, one luminous wheel.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But there are other accounts where they say two, and they are rotating opposite each other.
Because that's the scenario where the two wheels rotating like gears, one on either side of the ship, where you could say, okay, they're parallel lines moving past the ship in the same
and
direction.
they're going to a vanishing point at the
And
horizon.
so when you look off that way into the horizon, it looks like the wheel is turning clockwise.
Yeah.
And then you look off the other side, and it looks like the wheel's turning counterclockwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it was just one, then when you looked off on one side of the ship, the lines would seem to diverge.
That's
They
right.
would go further apart.
Yeah.
And when you look off the other side, they would seem to
converge. Yeah. So he just says one wheel, but there are other accounts that say two.
Okay. We analyzed this in episode blank. blank.
Okay. So our attitude throughout this book, that here are extraordinary data, that they never would be exhumed and never would be massed together unless, well, here are the data. Our first datum is of something that was once seen to enter an ocean. It's from the Puritanic publication Science, which has yielded us little material, or which, like most Puritans, does not go upon a spree very often. Whatever the thing could have been, my impression is of tremendousness, or of bulk many times that of all meteorites in all museums combined. Also of relative slowness, or of a long warning of approach. The story in Science, Volume 5, is from an account sent to the Hydrographic Office at Washington from the branch office at San Francisco. On midnight, February 24th, 1885, latitude 37 degrees north and longitude 170 degrees east, or somewhere between Yokohama and Victoria, the captain of the bark Innerwich was aroused by his mate, who had seen something unusual in the sky. This must have taken appreciable time. The captain went on deck and saw the sky turning fiery red. Quote, all at once, a large mass of fire appeared over the vessel, completely blinding the spectators, unquote. The fiery mass fell into the sea. Its size may be judged by the volume of water cast up by it, said to have rushed towards the vessel with a noise that was deafening. The bark was struck flat aback, and a roaring white sea passed ahead. The master, an old, experienced mariner, declared that the awfulness of the sight was beyond description. So that sounds like they just saw a water impact, right?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. In Nature, Volume 37, we are told that an object described as a large ball of fire was seen to rise from the sea near Cape Race. We are told that it rose to a height of 50 feet and then advanced close to the ship, then moving away, remaining visible for 5 minutes. The supposition in nature is that it was ball lightning, but Flammarion in Thunder and Lightning, page 68, says that it was enormous. Details in the American Meteorological Journal, volume 6, from November 12th, 1887, the British steamer Siberian, that the object had moved against the wind before retreating, and that Captain Moore said that at about the same place he had seen such appearances before.
Are there any good videos of ball lightning, Watcher?
I haven't seen any. I've seen pictures of what people say are ball lightning.
I mean, some legit videos, that's what I'm wondering. Because
Yeah.
it just occurred to me that I've heard of this for so long, and this seems to be an accepted, scientifically accepted phenomenon. But
Yeah.
it's one of those where, well, of course, I haven't really looked to go see it.
I found photos, but
some like really good videos of it.
I
So
haven't
this
seen
is-
any video, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know. If there's no good videos of ball lightning, it's suggestive.
Yeah.
It's suggestive that there are phenomena that exist that that are common enough to where people say that they've seen it, but there's just not a lot of video footage of
Yeah.
it that's good.
Another one's like the giant squid. People have seen it for hundreds, thousands of years have reported these things, and it was never accepted until very recently when they finally got like quote unquote scientific evidence of
Well,
one.
they actually got some specimens.
Yeah, they were able to call one up from the deep and get footage of it. I'm just saying that like they were reported for a long time and people were like, "Poppygosh."
What is this? How do you call a squid? I mean, I'm like, what are they? You take some slate and a stick down there and freaking. How do you do it?
I don't know.
Giant
know.
squid call.
Yeah.
Dude, if you can find those on Amazon Watcher, let's get some. Because, yeah, we need to try that.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just ring him up,
No, just give him
Yeah,
just
just-
give him a call. Yeah.
I guess you could text him too.
Well, you just
What?
you drop a big oh, that's one in a house. Okay, well,
I mean, come on. Is this confirmed?
it's a YouTube video, bro. It's totally legit. It says ball lightning at the top and it's a YouTube link.
Okay, confirmed.
Okay. Report from the British Association, 1861. June 18th, 1845, according to the Malta Times, from the brig Victoria, about 900 miles east of Adalia in Asia Minor, 3 luminous bodies were seen to issue from the sea at about half a mile from the vessel, and they were visible for about 10 minutes. This story was never investigated, but other accounts that seem acceptably to be other observations upon this same sensational spectacle came in, as if of their own accord, and were published by Professor Baden-Powell. One is a letter from a correspondent at Mount Lebanon. He describes only 2 luminous bodies. Apparently, they were 5 times the size of the moon, each had appendages, or they were connected by parts that are described as sail-like or streamer-like, looking like large flags blown out by a gentle breeze. The important point here is not only suggestion of structure, but duration. The duration of meteors is a few seconds. Duration of 15 seconds is remarkable, but I think there are records of up to half a minute. But this object, if it were all one object, was visible at Mount Lebanon for about an hour. An interesting circumstance is that the appendages did not look like trains of meteors, which shine by their own light, but, quote, seemed to shine by light from the main bodies, unquote. In other words, they were illuminated not by their own internal light, but,
Right.
yeah. 900 miles west of the position of the Victoria is the town of Adalia in Asia Minor. At about the time of the observation reported by the captain of the Victoria, the Reverend F. Hawlett, a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, was in Adalia, and he too saw this spectacle and sent an account to Professor Baden-Powell. In his view, it was a body that appeared and then broke up. He places duration at 20 minutes to half an hour. In the report of the British Association in 1860, the phenomena was reported from Syria and Malta as 2 very large bodies that were nearly joined. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And again, he's remember what he said earlier. He was like, we're going to start looking at these phenomena that seem maybe to merge with what might be natural into things that are way out in the extraordinary. So that's what we're doing, is moving in our intermediatist way from things that may merge with the natural phenomena into more and more extraordinary stuff that are difficult to explain. So the part that makes this one interesting is that, number one, it's visible for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, up to an hour, depending on where you were. And that there were 3 luminous bodies that seemed to come out of the water, and then they're attached to each other by streamers, or they broke up and had other pieces that were non-luminous that were lit by the main bodies. There's just, it doesn't sound like ball lightning, in other words, or a meteor.
All right.
I'm going to take a break.
Yep.
Time flies in the cube.
It sure does. Snakes.
Keeping in little awake by reason of our babble here at Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Trying to finish up Charles Fort's Book of the Damned, and maybe that's not going to happen this episode, but you never know. So we're still diving into strange appearances in the sky of luminous bodies, things merging away with possible meteorological phenomena. Upon the morning of December 20th, 1893, an appearance in the sky was seen by many persons in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. A luminous body passed overhead from west to east until about 15 degrees in the eastern horizon. It appeared to stand still for 15 or 20 minutes. According to some descriptions, it was the size of a table. To some observers, it looked like an enormous wheel. The light was brilliant white. Acceptably, it was not an optical illusion. The noise of its passage through the air was heard. Having been stationary or having seemed to stand still 15 or 20 minutes, it disappeared or exploded, but no sound of explosion was heard. So I thought, when I was reading this too, I thought, okay, so when it moves overhead, it seems to go really quickly, but then it gets onto the horizon and then it seems to stop because it's just traveling away from you.
Yeah.
But then but they hear it as it goes over. But then it seems to explode, but there's no sound there. So that implies it's really far away when that happens. So maybe it wasn't standing still. That could be a ball lightning report. I don't know. They do sometimes seem to make a lot of noise when they're nearby. Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, Volume 28. April 4th, 1901, 8:30 in the Persian Gulf. Captain something of the steamship Kilwa, according to a paper read before the society by the captain, was sailing in a sea which there was no phosphorescence, there being no phosphorescence in the water, but vast shafts of light, though the captain uses the word ripples, suddenly appeared. Shaft followed shaft upon the surface, but it was only a faint light, and in about 15 minutes it died out, having appeared suddenly, but dying out gradually. The shafts revolved at a velocity of about 60 miles an hour. Phosphorescent jellyfish correlate with the old dominant. In one of the most heroic compositions of disregards in our experience, it was agreed in the discussion of the captain's paper
That's what it was.
that the phenomenon was probably pulsations of long strings of jellyfish. Nature, Volume 21, a reprint of a letter from R.E. Harris, commander of the A.H.N. Company's steamship Shahjahan to the Calcutta Englishman, January 21st, 1880. On the 5th of June, 1880, off the coast of Malabar at 10 p.m., water calm, sky cloudless, he had seen something that was so foreign to anything he had ever seen before that he had to stop his ship. He saw what he describes as waves of brilliant light with spaces between. Upon the water were floating patches of a substance that was not identified.
What was the color of the light? I wonder.
The first one, he said it was bright white, I think.
Okay. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Thinking in terms of conventional explanation of all phosphorescence at sea, the captain at first suspected this substance, this unidentified substance floating on the surface. However, he gives his opinion that it did no illuminating, but was, with the rest of the sea, illuminated by tremendous shafts of light. Whether it was a thick and oily discharge from the engine of a submerged construction or not, I think that I shall have to accept this substance as a concomitant because of another note. As wave succeeded wave, one of the most grand and brilliant yet solemn spectacles that one can think of was here witnessed. So in this one, he's seeing the same shafts of light passing by. They seem to be moving past his ship at 60 miles an hour. He doesn't call it a wheel. He does describe them as waves of light. But at the same time, there's something floating on the surface that's being illuminated by these waves of light from underneath. In other words, the stuff on the surface is dark.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, might have been like foam or some kind of...
Yes, could have been foam.
We probably talked about this the last time we talked about these waves of light, but I remember the situation where the sea was all red. There was like all these crazy red light that looked like almost like lava that these pilots were photographing from above.
Yeah, from 30,000 feet.
Yeah. It was this massive patch of the...
Bunches of patches of red, and there was some green and purple. Yeah. Over, they were flying from... They were in the Arctic Ocean. They were flying to Alaska.
Man, that was strange.
Yes.
So I wonder, that's why I was wondering about the color. Like, you know, I wonder if down on the ground, or not the ground, but down
on the surface of the
down
water.
on the surface of the water, any ship that might have seen it would have seen like waves of this red light passing.
That's a great question. Yeah. Yep. And we got, of course, the classic.
Surely there had to be some ships at sea.
Well, that was the explanation given for the light. That the pilots just saw a bunch of ships on the ocean. Yeah, I'm serious.
It was like tons of... It was
I know.
Like huge patches of light.
Yeah. Yep. No, it was just groups of fishing vessels. These pilots are just
with
idiots.
red lights.
Yeah. Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, Volume 32. An extract from a letter from Mr. Douglas Carnegie, Blackheath in England. Date from sometime in 1906. Quote, "This last voyage we witnessed a weird and most extraordinary electric display. In the Gulf of Oman, he saw a bank of apparently quiescent phosphorescence, but when within 20 yards of it, shafts of brilliant light came sweeping across the ship's bows at a prodigious speed, which might be put down as anything between 60 and 200 miles an hour. These light bars were about 20 feet apart and most regular. As to phosphorescence, I collected a bucketful of water and examined it under the microscope, but could not detect anything abnormal. That the shafts of light came up from something beneath the surface. They first struck us on our broadside, and I noticed that an intervening ship had no effect on the light beams. They started away from the lee side of the ship just as if they had traveled right through it."
Mm-hmm.
From the journal,
Whereas if it was like something actually on the surface, when it went around that ship,
the ship should have cast a shadow. Yeah. The ship should have...
okay. If it was being lit from above.
Yeah, or if it was actually on the surface of the water casting it sideways, then the ship would cast a shadow towards this other ship. But if it was below, then if the source is below these ships, then it wouldn't.
Yeah.
From the Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, Volume 33, an extract from a letter by Mr. S.C. Patterson, second officer of the P&O steamship Delta, a spectacle which the journal continues to call phosphorescent. Malacca Strait, 2 a.m., March 14th, 1907. Shafts which seemed to move around a center, like the spokes of a wheel, and appeared to be about 300 yards long. The phenomenon lasted about half an hour, during which time the ship had traveled 6 or 7 miles, and it stopped suddenly.
So you can definitely see much further than 300 yards on the surface of the ocean, so... Yeah, they're describing it as a wheel. Must have been, they saw spokes way out in the distance that were moving.
Yeah, the other direction, and they could see the middle, what looked like the middle to them. Yeah. A correspondent writes that in October in 1891 in the China Sea, he had seen shafts or lances of light that had the appearance of rays of a searchlight and that had moved like such rays. In Nature, Volume 20, report to the Admiralty by Captain Evans of the hydrographer of the British Navy that Commander J.E. Pringle of HMS Vulture had reported that at latitude 26 degrees north and longitude 53 degrees east in the Persian Gulf. Remember how all these are in this area, the Persian Gulf, too. I think Sanderson pointed this out as well. May 15th, 1879, that he had noticed luminous waves or pulsations in the water moving at great speed. This time we have a definite datum upon origin somewhere below the surface. It is said that these waves of light passed under the Vulture. On looking towards the east, the appearance was that of a revolving wheel with a center on that bearing, whose spokes were illuminated. And looking to the west, a similar wheel appeared to be revolving, but in the opposite direction. Or finally, as to submergence, these waves of light extended from the surface well under the water. It is Commander Pringle's opinion that the shafts constituted one wheel and that the doubling was an illusion. He judges the shafts to have been about 25 feet broad and the spaces between about 100 feet. Velocity, 84 miles an hour. Duration, 35 minutes. Time was 9:40 p.m. Before and after this display, the ship had passed through patches of a floating substance described as oily-looking fish spawn. So again, there's this weird stuff.
That's crazy. And now I'm like, yeah, my mental image of that, like he describes the width and how fast, that's crazy, dude.
It's just,
yeah.
must have been amazing to watch.
And you're looking into the water and you can see the shaft going down.
Yes, it's got a depth to it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I love this stuff. Okay, Scientific American, Volume 106. That, in the Nautical Meteorological Annual, published by the Danish Meteorological Institute, appears a report upon a singular phenomenon that was seen by Captain Gabe of the Danish East Asian Company's steamship Bintang.
I was just thinking about like lasers, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe this is something from far above, but it's lasers. So it's like lasers from a single source that are
it does seem like something being scanned.
Yeah. Except that they did notice that the ship didn't cast a shadow on it. So how can it be from above? It would be something way down in the ocean,
it's
like
scanning
turning on and
upwards,
scanning upwards.
It's the giant
Whoa.
squid. It's the frickin' Cephas. Okay, at 3 a.m., June 10th, 1909, while sailing through the Straits of Malacca, Captain Gabe saw a vast revolving wheel of light, flat upon the water, long arms issuing from a center around which the whole system appeared to rotate. So vast was the appearance that only half of it could be seen at a time, the center lying near the horizon. This display lasted about 15 minutes. Heretofore, we have not been clear upon the important point that forward motions of these wheels do not synchronize with a vessel's motions, and freaks of disregard, or rather, commonplaces of disregard, might attempt to assimilate with lights of a vessel. But this time we are told that the vast wheel moved forward, decreasing in brilliancy and also in speed of rotation, disappearing when the center was just ahead of the vessel. So in their interpretation of what they were seeing, this giant wheel was spinning, and at first the center appeared to be on the horizon, but as they continued to sail, it was fading, but they appeared to just begin to get over the center of the spokes before it completely disappeared.
Yeah, and they're saying, of course, it slowed down. Like the center of the turning wheel would appear to be slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
Versus the far, like the
way out at the
way
edges.
out at the edges.
Yeah.
Like if there was some kind of laser that had this spoke,
Yeah, you're right.
formation,
A
and it was
fixed
spinning,
wheel.
then
Yeah.
like way out on the wings, they'd be really fat and hauling ass.
Moving.
Except they'd be bright.
Yeah.
I mean they'd be dim at the
Yeah.
edges.
Yeah.
And brighter towards the middle, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, that depends on what the source is. If the source itself is as big as the scanner, as the thing you're seeing, it doesn't have to get dimmer. Or in other words, if the source is way down there, then the dimness would just be a function of how far away it is from the source.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the thickness of the bands of light would be further away from the source. That's why they're fatter.
Yeah.
So they'd be dimmer. So that
They would be
That
dimmer.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
Unless the
But it does.
intensity...
He does say it seems to get dimmer as they get towards the middle. So what you're saying is it should get brighter as they get towards the middle.
If the middle is closer to the source.
To the source, yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Okay, the Danish...
But still, the spinning would seem to get slower.
Slow down, yeah, as you approach the center. The Danish Meteorological Institute reports another instance that when Captain Breyer of the Dutch streamer Valentijn was in the South China Sea at midnight on August 12, 1910, he saw a rotation of flashes. It looked like a horizontal wheel turning rapidly. This time it is said that the appearance was above the water. The phenomenon was observed by the captain, the first and second mates, and the first engineer, and upon all of them it made a somewhat uncomfortable impression. So now
the flashes are when the wheel is turning, and out on the edges of the wheel, the light is facing you, and it's like...
Yeah, that's right. And it seemed to be above the water itself, yeah. So somewhere way out there on the distance.
You're looking at the edge of the wheel.
Edge of the wheel, yes. In 1848, at the meeting of the British Association of 1848, Sir W.
Yeah, so Watcher's pointing out that this if it was like, imagine the laser scenario, if it was underwater, when they were approaching, but they're out far away from when they're on the edges of the spokes, it's brighter because the center is shallower, and it's like this thing is going down in the water as they approach it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so by the time they get to the center, it's dim.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Sir W.S. Harris said that he had recorded an account sent to him of a vessel toward which had whirled 2 wheels of fire, which the men described as rolling millstones. When they came near, an awful crash took place. The top masts were shivered to pieces, and it said that there was a strong sulfurous odor. So that's the final and most extraordinary part in the book of that chapter of wheels. So we start out with wheels spinning in the underwater, then we get to them spinning above the water, and then we have 2 wheels of fire that run into each other and actually destroy the top part of the ship. Oh, man. All right, chapter 22. Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society, Volume 1. Extract from the log of the bark Lady of the Lake by Captain F. W. Banner. Communicated by R.H. Scott, Fellow of the Royal Society. Upon the 22nd of March in 1870, at latitude 5 degrees north, longitude 27 degrees west, the sailors of the Lady of the Lake saw a remarkable object or cloud in the sky, and they reported to the captain. According to Captain Banner, it was a cloud of a circular form with an included semicircle divided into 4 parts, the central dividing shaft beginning at the center of the circle and extending far outwards and then curving backward. So this is... When I was reading this, I read through it multiple times trying to get the shape. Fort does provide a diagram. It's a tiny little diagram in the book. So you have a big circle, and then the circle is divided into parts, but there's only 3 of those parts present, and then there's this long tail coming out that curves and comes back towards the ship. This is a drawing that was provided by the captain. So you might have to just look in the book to see this drawing. It's difficult to describe. Geometricity and complexity, instability of form, and the small likelihood of a cloud maintaining such diversity of features, to say nothing of appearance of organic form. This thing reported to travel from a point at about 20 degrees above the horizon to a point about 80 degrees above, and then it settled down to the northeast, having appeared from the south or southeast. It was a light gray in color, or cloud-colored, but it was much lower than the other clouds, and this datum stands out, that whatever it may have been, it traveled against the wind. It came up obliquely against the wind and finally settled down right in the wind's eye, said the captain. For a half an hour, this form was visible, and when it did finally disappear, that was not because it disintegrated like a cloud, but because it was lost to sight in the evening darkness.
It looks like it could be. Was it a light? Was it like luminous?
No, just a...
It was like grayish, like a cloud?
Yeah.
But it, like the shape of it in the diagram kind of reminds me of those weird, horseshoe crab things in space.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought too. The space planktons, giant space bacterias.
Yeah. Think of like like a stick drawing of a scorpion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there you go.
You know what I mean? It's got this like long thing that comes out and curls up at the end, like
and
a
then
tail.
It's got the 2 claws.
And then it's got 2 claws sticking out, but
yeah,
you just make a circle out of the claws. But.
Yeah. All right. That's it for chapter 22. It's very short. It's just that one account.
Okay.
Chapter 23. Textbooks tell us that the Dhurmsala meteorites were picked up soon, or within half an hour. Given a little time, the conventionalists may argue that these stones were hot when they fell, but that their great interior coldness had overcome the molten state of their surfaces. But according to the deputy commissioner of Dhurmsala, these stones had been picked up immediately. And these stones were so cold that they numbed the fingers, but they had fallen with a great light. It is described as a flame of fire 2 feet in depth and 9 feet in length. Apparently, or acceptably, this light was not the light of molten matter. So in this chapter, we are very intermediatistic and unsatisfactory. To the intermediatist, there is but one answer to all questions. Sometimes, and sometimes not.
Well, it could have been like sublimated materials from the surface or igniting. But that's the process of cooling the object, right? Like that's...
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like in other words, the reason why water boils is well, it's not the reason, but the boiling of water is actually acting to cool the water itself.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to get it above 212 without
yeah.
pressurizing it so that it doesn't boil, because the boiling, even though you're applying a flame,
Yeah.
it's staying
At 212.
roughly
yeah.
212.
Right.
So you can have a solid that's coming in that's freezing cold and like a ridiculously cold temperature, and then its interaction with the atmosphere is it's oblating the surface of it, sublimating materials which are boiling, turning to a gas essentially instantly,
Yeah.
like from a solid to
And
a
then
gas.
it just leaves a cold stone
acting
afterwards.
to cool the
Yeah.
actual stone. So when it hits the ground, it's cold.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not necessarily cooling the stone, but preventing it from rising in temperature.
Yeah.
That's just my.
And would that sublimation cause bright light, fire, and all that?
yeah, because
possibly?
once it turns into a gas, and it can ignite,
Okay, yeah.
like behind the object or something.
Yeah. Well, this one part I wanted to include just because you and I were saying this near the beginning of reading this book, that the intermediatist is like yes and also no.
The
right?
problem is, I'm sorry, when it's entering the atmosphere, it's also entering a high pressure situation. So it would.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, go ahead. What?
The intermediatist says yes and also no. Remember we were talking about that? They'll say, well, it's like this. And the intermediatist is like, yes, it is. And if they say it isn't like this, you say, that's correct.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So he says in this chapter, we are very intermediatistic and unsatisfactory. To the intermediatist, there is but one answer to all questions, sometimes and sometimes not. Another form of this intermediatist solution of all problems is yes and also no. Everything that is also isn't. A positivist attempts to formulate, and so does the intermediatist, but with less rigorousness. He accepts, but he also denies. He may seem to accept in one respect and deny in some other respect, but no real line can be drawn between any two aspects of anything. The intermediatist accepts that which seems to correlate with something that he has accepted as a dominant. The positivist correlates with a belief. In the Dhurmsala meteorites, we have support for our expression that things entering this Earth's atmosphere sometimes shine with a light that is not the light of incandescence, or so we account, or offer an expression upon thunderstones, or carved stones that have fallen luminously to this earth in streaks that have looked like strokes of lightning. But we accept also that some things that have entered this atmosphere disintegrate with the intensity of flame and molten matter, but some things we accept enter this Earth's atmosphere and collapse non-luminously, quite like deep-sea fishes brought to the surface of the ocean. Luminous rains sometimes fall in nature. This is listed March 9th, 1882. This is light that is not the light of incandescence, but no one can say that these occasional or rare rains come from this Earth's externality. We simply note cold light of falling bodies. For luminous rain, snow, and dust, see Hartwig, Aerial World, page 319. As to luminous clouds, we have more nearly definite observations and opinions. They mark the transition between the old dominant and the new dominant. And yes, luminous clouds, noctilucent clouds, they're an accepted phenomenon now. But it's interesting because I don't know how much of them I marked, but he does go through and say, like, people were saying, I saw a cloud at night that was glowing, and people were like, they didn't believe the guy. In Himmel und Erde, is that, you know that one? Himmel?
Yeah, Erde.
Erde.
I guess.
February 1889. Is this German? A phenomenon of transition of 30 years ago.
Hair.
Oh, Jesse? Hesse? I don't know. Anyway, in his observations upon luminous night clouds, he notes the great height of them, and drolly or sensibly suggests that some of them may have come from regions external to this earth. So it's interesting because there is a merge here between the idea that it's external, because it is the reason they're luminous. We read about this in space weather news, the noctilucent clouds.
Yeah.
They glow because of the actions of the sun and the aurora and the,
Right.
Yeah,
Magnets.
right. There's magnet stuff happening. An account by M. Acarius in the Transactions of the Swedish Academy of Sciences in 1808, translated for the North American Review, that M. Acarius, having heard of an extraordinary and probably hitherto unseen phenomenon, reported from near the town in Sweden, investigated that upon the 16th of May, 1808, at about 4 p.m., the sun suddenly turned dull brick red. At the same time, there appeared on the western horizon a great number of round bodies, dark brown, and seemingly the size of a hat crown. They passed overhead and disappeared in the eastern horizon. Tremendous procession, and it lasted for 2 hours. Occasionally, one of them fell to the ground, and when the place of fall was examined, there was found a film, which soon dried and vanished. Often, when approaching the sun, these bodies seemed to link together, or were then seen to be linked together, in groups not exceeding 8, and under the sun they were seen to have tails 3 or 4 fathoms long. Away from the sun, the tails were invisible. Whatever their substance may have been, it is described as gelatinous and soapy or jellied. So that is a weird account right there. They just see a great number of enormous dark brown bodies passing overhead, and when they move between the people and the sun, they seem to be attached. Some of them seem to fall, and when they go to see where they fell, there's just like this film on the ground, like they were bubbles. It's weird.
The guy's name was Himmel O. Erde, or E-R-D-E.
Himmel und Erde.
So Watcher is saying Himmel und Erde means heaven and earth, like und being and.
Okay, so that's the name of the journal, Himmel und Erde.
Oh, okay.
In Himmel und Erde, Heaven and Earth, February 1889.
Yeah, Erde.
Okay, cool.
That's cool.
Okay, so Fort says, I place this datum here for several reasons. It would have been a good climax to our expression upon hordes of small bodies that, in our acceptance, were not seeds, nor birds, nor ice crystals, but the tendency would have been to jump to the homogeneous conclusion that all our data in that expression related to this one kind of phenomena, whereas we conceive of infinite heterogeneity of the external, of crusaders and rabbles and immigrants and tourists and dragons and things like gelatinous hat crowns, or that all things here upon this earth that flock together are not necessarily sheep or Presbyterians or gangsters or porpoises. The data is important to us here as indication of disruption in this earth's atmosphere, dangers in entering this earth's atmosphere. I think, myself, that thousands of objects have been seen to fall from aloft and have exploded luminously and have been called ball lightning. As to what ball lightning is, we have not yet begun to make intelligent guesses. From Monthly Weather Review. In general, it seems to me that when we encounter the opposition ball lightning, we should pay little attention, but confine ourselves to guesses that are at least intelligent, that stand phantom-like in our way. We note here that in some of our acceptances upon intelligence, we should more clearly have pointed out that they were upon the intelligent as opposed to the instinctive. In the Monthly Weather Review, Volume 33, there is an account of ball lightning that struck a tree, and it made a dent, such as a falling object would make. Some other time I shall collect instances of ball lightning to express that they are instances of objects that have fallen from the sky, luminously, exploding terrifically. So bewildered is the old orthodoxy by these phenomena that many scientists have either denied ball lightning or have considered it very doubtful. But I refer to Dr. Sestier's list of 150 instances which he considered authentic. One of the most astonishing of the phenomena of ball lightning is a phenomenon of many meteorites, violence of explosion out of all proportion to size and velocity. So we accept that the icy meteorites of Dhurmsalla could have fallen with no great velocity, but the sound from them was tremendous. The soft substance that, okay, so that may also correlate to what you were saying. These Dhurmsalla meteorites that were seen to fall brightly and luminously, but were cold, they made a huge noise. So if there was a bunch of exploding, sublimating gas. Yeah. And the soft substance that fell at the Cape of Good Hope was carbonaceous, but was unburned or had fallen with velocity insufficient to ignite it. The tremendous report that it made was heard over an area that was more than 70 miles in diameter. So now, here we have a carbonaceous substance that was unburned, but it made a gigantic explosion when it was coming down. Nature, Volume 88, Large Hailstones, noted at the University of Missouri, November 11th, 1911, and they exploded with sounds like pistol shots. The writer says that he had noted a similar phenomenon 18 years before at Lexington, hailstones that seemed to have formed in a denser medium because when they melted underwater, they gave out bubbles that were larger than their central air spaces. So the implication there is that these hailstones fall and then they explode because they have high pressure air bubbles inside them.
That's cool.
And yet they must form high up where you would think that the pressure should be lower.
Really low.
Yeah. And then this guy, and then the person who is the writer in Nature is saying, yes, 18 years before in Kentucky, there were these hailstones. And when we melted them, these bubbles came out.
Yeah, but you have the solidification of gases into ice, right? Like there could be scenarios where somehow these, like they have
frozen gas.
They have dissolved gases in them.
Yeah, don't those turn into like little tiny air bubbles in the ice though? The gas itself isn't going to freeze because it's too cold.
That's too cold.
Yeah, it's not going to be dry ice or whatever. But
it's really weird.
Yeah, it's just interesting that like they have the hailstones have pockets of highly pressurized gas in them, and then they fall and boom, they explode. So all these
could the hailstones be the result of like an actual extraterrestrial impact? Not impact, but something. It's like
an extraterrestrial object with high pressure gas in it. I don't know. That's crazy.
No, not high pressure. What I'm saying is like something impacting in the atmosphere and the atmosphere being saturated with gases.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that sudden high pressure of the thing impacting the atmosphere causes the.
Just seems like that would be hot. It would be hard to make hailstones in it. I don't know.
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm looking at ball lightning right now on Wikipedia too. By the way, it's pretty interesting.
Okay, well we're on a break, so we can pause.
I don't want to keep sidetracking. We're trying to finish the book.
No, you're not sidetracking, but I don't want you distracted while I'm reading either. It's like
sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm just like fascinated by this ball lightning situation because
maybe we can do an episode on ball lightning after we finish the book.
It's like there have been scientists that have seemed to they're publishing results where they're looking at the possibility of actually doing direct observation of ball lightning, measuring its this emission spectrum. So I mean, this is taken seriously.
Yeah, it is.
And yet there's like no.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we got the most, technologically advanced. Everybody's carrying a camera
this is
around, and they can't find a freaking good video of ball lightning. Right? It obviously doesn't exist. So my point in the reason why I keep bringing this up is because this is an accepted thing.
Yeah.
Scientists are looking for, and they've apparently published papers on direct observations of this emission spectrum of what they consider to be ball lightning.
Right?
But they don't have photographs.
Oh, okay.
They don't have. It's like.
Yes,
recordings made in July 2012 of the optical spectrum of what was thought to be natural ball lightning made by chance during the study of ordinary cloud to ground lightning on the Tibetan plateau.
Yeah, so it's.
There's 1.64 seconds of digital video of the ball lightning and its spectrum that was made. So yeah, like not even 2 seconds of it.
Right.
But of course, they talk initially about how it's an unexplained phenomenon described as luminescent spherical objects that vary from pea size to several meters in diameter.
Yep.
Usually associated with thunderstorms. The observed phenomenon can and has been reported to last considerably longer than the split-second flash of a lightning bolt, and is a phenomenon distinct from St. Elmo's fire.
Yes, that's right.
And there's a lot of 19th century reports. So it's just, I mean, this is like, people ask this about the UFO phenomenon.
They do.
Right? If this is happening and so many people have witnessed it, now that we're all carrying badass cameras, how come we don't have decent footage?
Yeah.
Well,
Especially when you think of how...
first explain ball lightning.
Right. And then, yes, exactly. And then you also think of how often unexplained phenomena has been passed off as ball lightning, and we don't have any good pictures of that either.
That's another good point. So next time somebody asks you that, just be like, explain ball lightning to me then.
Yeah. Don't answer
before
a mystery
I answer
with a
that
mystery.
question.
That's right. All right, let's take a break.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. The final segment of the final hour of the final episode of the Book of the Damned, hopefully. Well, I guess we could do another segment.
We have
maybe.
to finish the book. I mean, like,
We're finishing the book, so
There's
it may
not
not be
enough
the final segment.
Yeah, there's not enough for another show, for
All
sure.
right.
So we're finishing it tonight.
Go.
So it is our expression that there have been reported instances of the fall of manufactured metal from the sky. The meteorite of Rutherford in North Carolina is of artificial material, a mass of pig iron, but it is said to be fraudulent. Then there's an object that was said to have fallen at Marblehead in Massachusetts in 1858. It is described in the American Journal of Science as a furnace product formed in smelting copper ores or iron ores containing copper, and it is said to be fraudulent. According to Ehrenberg, the substance reported by Captain Callum to have fallen upon his vessel near Java offered complete resemblance to the residue resulting from the combustion of a steel wire in a flask of oxygen. Nature, November 21st, 1878, publishes a notice that, according to the Yuma Sentinel, a meteorite that resembles steel had been found in the Mojave Desert. In Nature, February 15th, 1894, we read that one of the meteorites brought to the United States by Peary from Greenland is of tempered steel. The opinion is that meteoritic iron had fallen in water or snow, which quickly cooled and hardened it. This does not apply to composition. November 5th, 1898, in Nature, publishes a notice upon a paper by Professor Berworth of Vienna upon the close connection between meteoric iron and steelworks steel. At the meeting of November 24th, 1906, of the Essex Field Club, was exhibited a piece of metal said to have fallen from the sky on October 9th, 1906, in Braintree. According to the Essex naturalist, Dr. Fletcher of the British Museum had declared this metal to be smelted iron, quote, so that the mystery of its reported fall remains unexplained, unquote. So I just put all those in there. I wanted to read them real quick because it's interesting how Fort starts with the ones that are said to be fraudulent and then moves into ones that are just unexplained because it's tempered, right, or whatever. But it's interesting because, I see these, it's said to be fraudulent or whatever, and this is how you get the thing where people will say, well, there's no record of that. And it's just like, well, yes, there is. They just claim them to be hoaxes.
Right.
I'm not saying they aren't. I'm just saying that if something, with what Ford is telling us about the dominant and how these people are comparing things to a belief system, then they'll say it's fraudulent because it must be, because it doesn't fit this belief system. It's unreasonable to think that slag or artificial materials can fall from the sky. So it must be a fraud. And then it's listed as fraud. And then they can later say there's no records of stuff like that falling from the sky.
Yes.
It's just, I don't know. Okay. Chapter 24. A most extraordinary and singular phenomenon in North Wales. August 26, 1894, a disc from which projected an orange-colored body that looked like an elongated flatfish was reported by Admiral O'Manery in Nature, Volume 50. And then there was a disc which projected a hook-like form in India in 1838. There was a diagram of it given. A disc about the size of the moon, but brighter than the moon, visible for about 20 minutes in Professor Baden-Powell's catalog. So this is just a big list of these. There was a brilliant hook-like form seen in the sky in Poland. Another one in Ohio during a stream of meteors of 1833. Visible for more than an hour, there was a large luminous body almost stationary for a time, shaped like a square table over Niagara Falls in November 13th of 1833. Something described as a bright white cloud at night, November 3rd, 1886, in Norway. From it were emitted brilliant rays of light, and it drifted across the sky, retained throughout its original form. There was a thing with an oval nucleus and streamers with dark bands and lines very suggestive of structure over New Zealand, May 4th, 1888, listed in Nature. And a luminous object, size of a full moon, visible for an hour and a half in Chile, November 5th, 1883. And a bright object near the sun, December 21st, 1882, which was listed in Knowledge. And there was something like a gigantic trumpet, suspended, vertical, oscillating gently, visible for 5 or 6 minutes, length estimated at 425 feet.
I wonder if that was a plasma form.
Yeah. Yes, over Mexico, July 6, 1874. 2 luminous bodies seemingly united, visible for 5 or 6 minutes, June 3rd, 1898. And a thing with a tail crossing the moon, a transit that lasted half a minute, September 26, 1870, listed in the London Times. An object 4 or 5 times the size of the moon, moving slowly across the sky, November 1st, 1885, near, I don't know what that one is, Adrianople? Let's see what that is. It's in Turkey. Okay. And a thing that was large and that was stationary twice in 7 minutes over Oxford, November 19th, 1847. So that one's interesting. There's there's not many details, but the stationary twice over 7 minutes. So it moves, stops, moves, stops. And a report by an astronomer in S. Drayton upon an object of a duration of which seemed to him to be extraordinary. Duration was 3/4 of a minute over Jersey City, July 6, 1882. And an object like a comet, but with proper motion of 10 degrees an hour, visible for 1 hour. Reported by Glancy from the Cordoba Observatory in Argentina, March 14th, 1916. And something like a signal light, reported by Glacier, October 4th, 1844. It was bright as Jupiter and sending out quick, flickering waves of light. That is from the Yearbook of Facts in 1845.
I need that book.
So that's just a big list there of, and all of these things, you see how they can merge with possible meteorological phenomena, but on the other end with UFO sightings.
Yes.
Very fascinating to me. Okay. So a person named Eddie reported a celestial object from the observatory at Grahamstown, South Africa. This was in 1890. The new dominant was only heir presumptive then, or heir apparent, but not obvious. The thing that Eddie reported might as well have been reported by a night watchman who had looked up through an unplaced sewer pipe, because it did not correlate. He's just using a sewer pipe. That's his telescope. In Nature, presumably a vassal of the new god, though of course also plausibly rendering homage to the old, is reported a comet-like body of October 27th, 1890, observed at Grahamstown by Eddie. It may have looked comet-like, but it moved 100 degrees while visible, or 100 degrees in 3/4 of an hour. You can see this in Nature, Volume 43.
Wow, so it could have been some chunk of ice that's like really close to the Earth,
Yeah,
almost like a satellite,
right.
and it's outgassing.
It can't be in the atmosphere. It's
No,
moving
it
too
would
slow
have to
for
be
that.
orbit,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's in orbit, but it's really close. Yeah, it moves 100 degrees in an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in Nature, Volume 44, the next volume, Professor Copeland describes a similar appearance that he had seen on September 10th in 1891. Dreyer says in Nature that he had seen this object at the Armagh Observatory, and he likens it to the object that was reported by Eddie. And this was also seen by Dr. Alexander Graham Bell on September 11th in 1891 in Nova Scotia. So there were different observations upon something that was seen in November of 1883, and these observations were Philistines in 1883.
What was the month? What was the month that he saw it?
So Eddie sees something in October.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then Professor Copeland writes in and says, well, I saw something similar in September, and so did Alexander Graham Bell see it.
Yeah, I wonder when,
What do you mean?
Like, did he see it like on October 8th? Or
October 27th is when Eddie saw his.
And then the September object? Was it late September?
September 10th.
Okay, so.
And Dr. Alexander Graham Bell saw his on September 11th. But a very similar object. So, okay, so yeah, there were different observations in the American Meteorological
ballpark, though.
Yes, it is. In the American Meteorological Journal, Volume 1, a correspondent reports having seen an object like a comet with two tails, one pointing up and one pointing down, November 12th or 10th or 12th, 1883. Very likely this phenomenon should be placed in our expression upon torpedo-shaped bodies that have been seen in the sky. So again, I'm listing these because of how they merge with UFO. Like we see, there's reports of cigar-shaped UFOs quite often. Yeah. In the Scientific American, Volume 50, a correspondent writes from Puerto Rico on November 21st, 1883, he and several other persons as it were, had seen a majestic appearance like a comet. It was visible for 3 successive nights and disappeared. The editor says that he can offer no explanation. If accepted, this thing must have been close to the Earth. If it had been a comet, it would have been seen widely and the news would have been telegraphed over the world, says the editor. But upon page 97 of this volume of the Scientific American, a correspondent writes that at Sulphur Springs, Ohio, he had seen a wonder in the sky at about the same date. It was torpedo-shaped, or it was something with a nucleus at each end of which was a tail. Again, the editor says that he can offer no explanation, that the object was not a comet. He associates it with the atmospheric effects general in 1883. But it will be our expression that in England and Holland, a similar object was seen in November of 1882. All right, chapter 25. We're moving along here. Nature, volume 40, August 5th, 1889. During a violent storm, an object that looked to be about 15 inches long and 5 inches wide fell rather slowly in England, and it exploded, and no substance from it was found. October 10th, 1864, Miss M. Leverrier had sent to the Academy 3 letters from witnesses of a long, luminous body tapering at both ends that had been seen in the sky. And on July 2nd, 1907, in the town of Burlington, Vermont, a terrific explosion had been heard throughout the city. A ball of light, or a luminous object, had been seen to fall from the sky or from a torpedo-shaped thing or construction in the sky. And here's a report from that. I was standing on the corner of Church and College Streets, just in front of the Howard Bank and facing east, engaged in conversation with ex-Governor Woodbury and a Mr. A. Boole, when without the slightest indication or warning, we were startled by what sounded like a most unusual and terrific explosion, evidently very nearby. Raising my eyes and looking eastward along College Street, I observed a torpedo-shaped body some 300 feet away, stationary in appearance and suspended in the air about 50 feet above the tops of the buildings. In size, it appeared to be 6 feet long by 8 inches in diameter, the shell or covering having a dark appearance, with here and there tongues of fire issuing from spots on the surface, resembling a red-hot, unburnished copper. Although stationary when first noticed, this object soon began to move rather slowly and disappeared over Dolan Brothers' store southward. As it moved, the covering seemed rupturing in places, and through these intensely red flames issued. I mean, what is that? It does sound like a Zeppelin, but it's... I don't know. And it drops a bomb on Burlington? Okay, E.W. Maunder, invited by the editor of the observatory to write some reminiscences for the 500th number of their magazine, gives one that he says stands out. from the Observatory, Volume 39. It is upon something that he terms a strange celestial visitor. Maunder was at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, November 17th, 1882, at night. There was an aurora without features of special interest. But in the midst of the aurora, a great circular disk of greenish light appeared and moved smoothly across the sky. But the circularity was evidently the effect of foreshortening. The thing passed above the moon and was, by other observers, described as cigar-shaped, or like a torpedo, or a spindle, or a shuttle. The idea of foreshortening is not mine. Maunder says this. And he says, had the incident occurred a third of a century later, beyond doubt everyone would have selected the same simile. It would have been just like a zeppelin. The duration was about 2 minutes. Color said to have been the same as that of the auroral glow in the north. Nevertheless, Maunder says that this thing had no relation to auroral phenomena. It appeared to be a definite body, and motion was too fast for a cloud, but nothing could be more unlike the rush of a meteor.
Is this the guy that discovered the connection with the solar cycles, the Maunder minimum?
Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting. The observatory, the editor invited him to, like, you've been reading our magazine for forever, so take some stuff from it from our magazine's past that you think are interesting and do an article. And they published it, and he was like, here's one that's crazy and weird and unexplained. So he's kind of
cool.
being a little snaky there. Yeah.
That's cool.
So they're watching the aurora, and then this big disc appears. But then as it moves overhead, it appears that the disc shape was a foreshortening artifact. It was
I
a
think
long
there was some
torpedo.
discussion about this, the shaping of these objects as they enter the solar system, about Oumuamua,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What causes them to become disc-shaped or cigar-shaped when they enter a solar system and start to outgas and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
How they can flatten.
Yeah. That's right.
So I guess Watcher thinks you mispronounced something.
Greenwich. Probably. Most likely. It is spelled Greenwich, but it's Greenwich.
Okay.
Yeah, and he also says, it appeared to be a definite body, but it was moving too slow to be a meteor, but too fast to be anything else.
Yeah, I've seen something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
You watch enough meteors, enough planes, and enough satellites, and then you see something that
Doesn't fit any of that stuff.
it doesn't. It's a light in the sky,
Yeah.
but it doesn't fit any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's right. About 8 lights that were seen. Okay, chapter 26. About 8 lights that were seen in Wales over an area of about 8 miles that were all keeping their own ground, whether moving together perpendicularly or horizontally or over a zigzag course. They looked like electric lights, disappearing, reappearing dimly, and then shining as bright as ever. We have seen them 3 or 4 at a time afterward on 4 or 5 occasions. That's a report from Notes and Queries, Volume 5. In Scotland, 2 large, bright lights that looked like stars had been seen in the sky, sometimes stationary, but occasionally moving at high velocity. So again, you have this merging
Changing
into
speed,
UFOs, yes. And that was in 1848, so it's not a satellite. At least not one of ours. Maybe one of the... Yeah, it's the Black Knight. St. Petersburg, July 30th, 1880. In the evening, a large spherical light and 2 smaller ones moving along a ravine. It was visible for 3 minutes and then disappeared without a sound. Then there's the account of the false lights of Durham. Every now and then, in the English newspaper... In the middle of the 19th century, there is something about lights that were seen against the sky, but as if not far above land, oftenest upon the coast of Durham. They were mistaken for beacons by sailors, and wreck after wreck occurred.
Man.
The fishermen were accused of displaying false lights and profiting by wreckage, and the fishermen answered that mostly only old vessels worthless except for insurance were wrecked. In 1886, in the London Times, January 9th, popular excitement became intense and there was an investigation. Before a commission headed by Admiral Collinson, testimony was taken. One witness described the light that had deceived him as considerably elevated above the ground, so no conclusion was reached. The light were called the mysterious lights, but whatever the false lights of Durham may have been, they were unaffected by this investigation. In the report of the British Association, 1877, there is a description of a group of meteors that traveled with remarkable slowness. They were in sight for about 3 minutes. Remarkable, it seems, is scarcely strong enough. One reads of remarkable as applied to a duration of 3 seconds. But these meteors had another peculiarity. They left no train. They are described as seemingly huddled together like a flock of wild geese and moving with the same velocity and grace of regularity. In the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, November and December 1913. According to many observations collected by Professor Chant of Toronto, there appeared on the night of February 9th in 1913 a spectacle that was seen in Canada and the United States and at sea and in Bermuda. A luminous body was seen, and to it there was a long tail. The body grew rapidly larger. Observers differ as to whether the body was single or was composed of 3 or 4 parts with a tail to each part. The group, or complex structure, moved with a peculiar and majestic deliberation. It disappeared in the distance, and another group would emerge from its place of origin, and onward they moved at the same deliberate pace in 2s or 3s or 4s. And then they disappeared, and then a third group or a third structure would follow.
Wow. 1913 is also the year that the guy discovered the connection between the comet and the Draco.
Yes, that's right.
Like that's the, what is it? He discovers the connection between comets and meteor showers.
Yeah, that's right. Some observers compared the spectacle to a fleet of airships, others to battleships attended by cruisers and destroyers. According to one writer, there were probably 30 or maybe 32 bodies, and the peculiar thing about them was they're moving in 4s and 3s and 2s abreast of one another. And so perfect was the lining up that you would have thought it was an aerial fleet maneuvering after rigid drilling.
That's definitely UFOs.
Yeah, that's right.
That's classic.
Nature, May 25th, 1893. A letter from Captain Charles J. Of the HMS Caroline. That upon the 24th of February, 1893, at 10 p.m., between Shanghai and Japan, the officer of the watch had reported some unusual lights. They were between the ship and a mountain. The mountain was about 6,000 feet high. The lights seemed to be globes. They moved sometimes massed, but sometimes strung out in an irregular line. They bore northward until lost to sight, and the duration was 2 hours. And the next night, these lights were seen again. They were, for a time, eclipsed by a small island. Then they bore north about the same speed and in about the same direction and speed as the direction of the Caroline. But they were lights that cast a reflection. There was a glare upon the horizon under them. A telescope brought out but few details. They were reddish and seemed to emit a faint smoke. This time the duration was 7.5 hours. Then the captain says that in the same general locality and at about the same time, Captain Castle of the HMS Leander had seen lights, and he had altered his course and made toward them, and the lights seemed to flee from him. At least they moved higher into the sky. So this is more UFO stuff. A report from the observations of 3 members of his crew by Lieutenant Frank H. Schofield of the USN of the USS Supply. February 24th, 1904. 3 luminous objects of different sizes, the largest having an apparent area of about 6 suns. When first sighted, they were not very high. They were below clouds of an estimated height of about 1 mile. Then they went up into the clouds below which they had at first been sighted. In the summer of 1896, when this writer was a railroad postal clerk. Okay, so this is a letter from somebody. 2 letters from this person. In the summer of 1896, when this writer was a railroad postal clerk, or one who was experienced in train phenomena, while his train was going northward from Trenton, he and another clerk saw, in the darkness of a heavy rain, a light that appeared to be round and of a dull rose color, and seemed to be about a foot in diameter. It seemed to float within 100 feet of the Earth, but it would rise high or midway between the horizon and the zenith. The wind was quite strong from the east, but the light held a course almost due north. Its speed varied. Sometimes it seemed to outrun the train considerably. At other times, it seemed to fall behind. The mail clerks watched until the town of Linville, Iowa was reached. Behind the depot of this town, the light disappeared and was not seen again. All this time, there had been rain, but very little lightning. But Mr. Krotzenberg offers the explanation that it may have been ball lightning. But the editor of the review disagrees. He thinks that the light may have been a reflection from the rain or fog, or from leaves of trees glistening with rain, or the train's lights, or in other words, not lights in the sky. In the December number of the review is a letter from Edward M. Boggs. He says that the light was a reflection, perhaps from the glare, one light this time, from the locomotive's firebox upon wet telegraph wires. An appearance that might not be striated by the wires, but consolidated into one rotundity, that it had seemed to oscillate with the undulations of the wires, and had seemed to change horizontal distance with the varying angles of reflection, and had seemed to advance or fall behind when the train had rounded curves. All of this
That's a pretty good explanation, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, all of this is typical of the best of quasi-reasoning. It includes and assimilates diverse data, but it excludes that which will destroy it, which is that acceptably the telegraph wires were alongside the track, beyond, as well as leading to, the town of Linville. In other words...
Yeah, so it should have kept going.
Right, yeah.
But it's still, I mean, whoever thought that up,
yeah.
You trying to figure stuff out in their mind. They're seeing, here's the glow of the thing, and it's moving up and down.
Yeah, as the wires are going up and down.
Good.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
You gotta hand it to the guy.
Yeah. Pretty good skirp.
Pretty good skirp, oh boy.
All right, we are coming to the end here, folks. Chapter 27. We summarize our general supergeographical expressions. Gelatinous regions, sulfurous regions, frigid and tropical regions, a region that has been the source of life relatively to this Earth. Regions wherein there is density so great that things from them entering this Earth's thin atmosphere explode. So that's interesting. He does speculate in here that maybe these things explode because there's really dense places up there and they get into our atmosphere and then it seems it's thin relative to where it came from and then it blows up, right? And it can still be cold when it does that. We have a datum of explosive hailstones. We now have support to the acceptance that they had been formed in a medium far denser than air of this Earth, at sea level. In the Popular Science News, Volume 22, is an account of ice that had been formed under great pressure in the laboratory of the University of Virginia, and when it was released and brought into contact with ordinary air, it exploded. Throughout this book, the datum that we are most impressed with is successive falls, or that if upon one small area things fall from the sky, and then, later, fall again upon the same small area, these are not products of a whirlwind, which, though sometimes axially stationary, they discharge tangentially. So the frogs that fell at Wigan, I have looked that matter up again, and later, more frogs fell. Now the element of positiveness in our composition yearns for the appearance of completeness. Super geographical lakes with fishes in them. Meteorites that plunge through these lakes on their way to the Earth. The positiveness in our makeup must have expression in at least one record of a meteorite that has brought down a lot of fishes with it. And here we have Nature, Volume 3. Near the bank of a river in Peru, February 4th, 1871, a meteorite fell, and on the spot, it was reported, many dead fishes were found of different species. The attempt to correlate is that the fishes are supposed to have been lifted out of the river and dashed against the stones. But, Nature Volume 4, the fishes had fallen amongst the fragments of the meteorite. Then there was the disk of quartz, said to have fallen from the sky after a meteoric explosion. It was said to have fallen at the plantation of Blegendal, Dutch Guiana. It was sent to the Museum of Leiden, to the adjutant to the governor of Dutch Guiana, and the fragments that fall from supergeographic ice fields, flat pieces of ice with icicles on them. I think that we did not emphasize enough that if these structures were not icicles but crystalline protuberances, such crystalline formations indicate long suspension quite as notably as would icicles. In the Popular Science News, Volume 24, it is said that in 1869 fell large hailstones with long protuberances. Quote, "The most remarkable point in connection with the hailstones is the fact that, judging from our present knowledge, a very long time must have been occupied in their formation." Unquote. According to the Geological Magazine, Volume 7, this fall occurred May 27, 1869. The writer in the Geological Magazine says that of all theories he had ever heard of, not one could give him light as to this occurrence. These growing crystalline forms must have been suspended a very long time. Again and again, this phenomenon, because 14 days later, at about the same place, more of these hailstones fell. Or that our whole solar system is a living thing. Showers of blood upon this earth are its internal hemorrhages. Or vast living things in the sky, as there are vast living things in the oceans. Or some one especial thing, in a special time, in a special place. A thing the size of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's alive in outer space, and something the size of Central Park kills it, and it drips. We think of the ice fields above this earth, which do not themselves fall to this earth, but from which water does fall. Popular Science News, Volume 35. According to Professor Luigi Palazzo, head of the Italian Meteorological Bureau, upon May 15th in 1890 in Calabria, something the color of fresh blood fell from the sky. This substance was examined in the public health laboratories of Rome, and it was found to be blood. Wow. The most probable explanation of this terrifying phenomenon is that migratory birds, quails, or swallows were caught and torn in a violent wind. So this substance was identified as bird's blood. What matters is what the microscopists of Rome said or had to say, and what matters is that we point out that there is no assertion that there was a violent wind at the time, and that such a substance would be almost infinitely dispersed in a violent wind, and that no bird was said to have fallen from the sky, or said to have been seen in the sky, and that not a feather of a bird is said to have been seen. But there is this one data, that fall of blood from the sky, and then later, in the same place, blood again fell from the sky. Book over.
That's freaking... Wow. Nice way to sum up the point there.
Yes.
They decide it's blood from birds, and there's no birds, and, and then blood falls again later. It's like this one-off situation. It's like we came up with an answer, and then it happens again.
Right.
God, in the same place.
Yeah.
God.
I love that he's like something the size of the Brooklyn Bridge, gets hit by something the size of Central Park, and it drips.
I can see that this is like, it's his way of thinking has been an inspiration for you for a long time, because he doesn't give you a suggestion of an answer other than that the answers are wrong.
Right. That's
right.
right.
It's
Yes.
actually a mystery, folks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's not, like, all these answers are bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, what is it then?
Podcast over.
Yeah. Exactly. Because the knee-jerk reaction was, well, then what is it? What was it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's not the point.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I mean, that's what I want to do, is try to figure out what it is. But you've always just been like, no, we don't know.
Yeah. Not enough data yet.
Yeah.
And the reason there's not enough data is because people won't even look at it seriously, right?
And
It's like,
that's happening.
Yeah. All right. Well,
It's really cool.
yeah. I hope
Good
you guys
job, you did
enjoyed
it.
that. Yes.
I don't know when the sands of time ended. But,
Oh, it was like almost perfect.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. I mean, I'd freaking planned this
go,
out
boy.
10 episodes ago. Perfect.
Nice.
Okay, so we got a couple things. We got some supporters.
We got a meetup first.
Oh, yes. Meetup stuff.
Meetup update or meetup date. Meetup update.
Meetup update.
So there's one cabin left, and we're just basically taking takers for spots in that cabin.
You mean the guest house?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, not a whole lot of spaces. We'll take a few more campers, but not too many because, campers have to share bathrooms with people. But anyway, if you're interested in going to the meetup, it's next month,
May 13th through the 15th.
13th through the 15th. That's right. 2 nights, and hopefully we'll get some rain, and we'll do some kayaking on the Nueces River, and hang out, barbecue. There's a swimming hole there that we'll have regardless of whether there's rain for kayaking. And then there's possibly a property that we can go explore that's nearby that's 100 and something acres.
Yeah. Might be able to do
That would be really freaking
surface
cool.
hunting.
We're just going to walk around and look at geology and stuff, and that'll be great. Obviously, the owner of the property that we're staying at, he's really cool. I've talked to him quite a few times and, basically kind of given him the gist of like who we are, what we're interested in, why we're gathering. And he seems very accommodating. Like, yeah, man, like I know a property that you got, maybe we could go explore and stuff. Like it's, it's private property around there. But of course, in the event that doesn't work, we've got, what's the name of the park? There's a park 45 minutes away. We could, with Old Baldy on it, we could go do an awesome hike.
Enchanted
out there.
Rock.
No,
Old Baldy. Garner
State Park. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, no matter what happens,
Rock is bald, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's the first thing.
No matter what happens, it's going to be fun.
Yep.
It's probably going to be a maximum of like 30 people, maybe a little more, but so go to the website and look under meetups and send us
Meetups
an
and
email.
events, yeah.
If you want a room, specify if you want a private room or if you want a place to sleep, because those are different things.
And we don't have many private rooms left.
Yeah, I think there's like one.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can just have a place to sleep and you'll be happy with that, good to go. It's BYO everything. So bring food. We are probably going to be, collectively grilling up some stuff together. Yeah. Everybody's going to bring some stuff, and I'm going to make sure we've got grills there. There's been some other volunteers that might bring grills, so we'll have
it's going to be awesome.
It'll be easy to cook in the evenings. We'll probably do breakfast together. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like, it'll work out. Trust me.
No one will starve.
Bring some sandwiches for your own snacks.
Yes.
And, something to throw in for some dinners if you want, to join everybody for a grill.
Yeah.
And should be a good time.
It is going to be a great time.
And then we do have some supporters here we need to thank. Number one is Greg, and I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, but I think it's Kaighin.
Or Kaighin. Yeah.
Kaighin. Greg, what's up, dude?
Thank you,
Haven't
buddy.
seen you in a long time. Thank you very much. $100 donation. You are executive producer of this final installment of the Book of the Damned, episode 239. And he says, I hate your podcast. 5 stars.
Yes.
As if I didn't have enough to fill up my days. Now I'm addicted to this.
Thank
Sorry
you, Greg.
about that, Greg. Thank you very much. And hope to see you again for a longer duration on another trip.
Yes.
Is he coming to Utah?
Hopefully you'll be at the Scablands.
Oh, Scablands. All right. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you again, oh boy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the donation. Much appreciated.
Yes.
You guys keep us going up here.
You absolutely do. And we have just in today a new
Ascended Snake Force Master.
Yes, that's right. Philip Baklamov signed up to the Snake Bros Patreon at the $72 level, which is the Ascended Snake Force Master. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty.
And you will join the list of those included at the end of the month as executive producers. But whenever somebody joins up at that level, we want to give you a
them
shout
special
out.
shout
Yes,
out.
that's right. So we really appreciate that. Let's see. I got some other stuff here that I need to pull up. And then, of course, Brothers of the Serpent at gmail.com. You guys can get a hold of us I do read all the emails. I can't read them all on the show, but I do read them all. And if you email us, you might get it right on the show. You never know. Check out the website. Again, the meetup stuff is there, and we will be doing future meetups. For those of you who can't make this one, obviously not everybody can make it, but we will do future ones, and we'd like to do them, in places other than Texas someday too. It's going to be fun. Like, I'd love to do this around the world. It would be great to do it in the UK and do it in Australia, but we're starting close to home and small. So
and this is like, man, it's a busy time too. So I was just like, well, I'll reserve the spots and then we'll just let everybody deal with it.
Yeah.
It's totally we're just like trying not to do too much work because I've got a lot of other things going on. So yeah, it's a little chaotic.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I trust you guys to know, hey, this is kind of how things run on the podcast. It's a classic
That's right.
Snake
It's
Bros
ad
fashion.
hoc.
Just like, here, let's just do this, announce it, no plan. All right. So that's the first one. But of course, we will be getting Holocene involved in future meetups, which is our amazing and wonderful team headed up by Laura.
Yeah. All of which
Snake
were
wife.
like, why didn't you guys get us to do this? And we're like,
So yeah, it'll be better. It'll grow and get better.
better.
But we were just kind of we've said we were going to do this, so let's do it. And then
Right.
we just winged it at the last minute.
classic Alex.
So thanks for everybody who's dealing with that.
Yeah. You can join the Pyramid Scheme through the Patreon or the PayPal. Check that on the website. Also, check out the Library of the Serpent that is run by Jeff. Thanks to History Shift for making all of our YouTube videos. And I've never done this, but I want to give a shout out to all the admins in the Discord. So I'm just going to go through this list real quick. Nick, Frank, Casey, Chris, Trevor, Morgan, Georgia, Marty, Mel, Josh, Ash, Andrew, Levi, Matt, Shannon, and of course, Saucy Jefferman, lover of books and boobs. Thank you guys so much. You're all heroes in my book. I watch you every day handling the Discord and making people feel welcome and helping them pass the test and keeping everything going. And just, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Really,
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It's just perfect for me because I don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Value for value.
It's value for value. All right, that's it. And we thanks to those people and thanks to all of you listeners out there because we love you guys.
Always have.
We always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.